Okay, so it's a little bit weird. It's a different presentation. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while because from a freshman, you're kind of told about like two phases of cybersecurity. There's a red team, and then there's a blue team, and there's nothing else. You're going to become a pen tester, you're going to become a SOC analyst, and there's not much beyond that. And I just think that's an enormous misnomer. So I'm going to make this presentation to talk about what you can actually do with your degree, because a lot of people feel like they're just pigeonholed into red or blue, offense or defense. So what can you do besides that? And then likewise, let's talk about what those roles do. So I'm Max, done a bunch of stuff. Main thing is I've worked at a lot of companies. I can't say that I've been either worked as even like a quarter of the roles that I'll talk about, but I've done a ton of stuff. I've loved working for so many companies, and I want to give a little bit of context to people who maybe haven't. Also, I kind of forgot to say it, but this is my last RITSEC presentation probably ever. I'm graduating in a week. I think Chase said this marks number 31. Yeah. So I want to do something a little bit special, and this was something I was particularly really wanted to do for you guys. So let's start off. So I talked about before CNC. It was a really bad attempt to try to like make a D&D analogy. I don't play D&D, but I think it is a pretty good analogy. So don't yell at me if I get some stuff wrong. I just probe people in the club room to say, hey, what's the best matchup for this? So cybersecurity is an extremely diverse industry, and I think anyone who like tries to find their niche is going to like realize that very soon. Most people end up getting pigeonholed into red or blue. Like I said, you're either, oh, Mr. Incident Response or Mr. Pen Tester or this or that or whatever it is. So I wanted to break it up into something a little bit different. So in D&D, there's things called classes, subclasses, and alignments. So subclasses, these are like your general role of your character. So what I moved this to, very imaginative, the type of role you're going to be in. So that's offense, defense, and we'll talk about some more later. Next, subclasses, which are like the specializations. So this is your specific job title. So again, I've never played, but according to people, you can be like a fighter. That's like a berserker or something, and then that's your class and subclass. And so this is like more specific once you get into that. So you can be an offensive security, or you can be an offensive security, but you can also be a pen tester, or you could be a red teamer, or you could be a vulnerability researcher. Lastly is alignment. This is generally your moral or ethical code. I interpreted this as your workplace. A lot of people will say, I want to be a pen tester. And you get to say, or even let's say SOC analyst or whatever it is. And it's like, oh, but where do you want to work? Because in security, job positions will drastically change. So if you're working for the government, if you're working for a startup, if you're working for a big tech company, if you're working for a government contractor, or maybe you're out on your own, the job description can vary so significantly that it can sometimes be completely different jobs. So let's start talking about these classes that I was referencing. First two are pretty obvious. We talked about offense and defense. You protect against cyber threats, or you're doing the ethically hacking testing, you're emulating cyber threats. Next, we talk about compliance. So ensure regulatory and as well as policy adherence. We have some classes on that, and I think everyone kind of gets that, so that you can say like, oh, I'm GDPR compliant, I'm SOC 2 certified, and stuff like that. Those are the people who make sure that those are actually valid compliances. Threat intelligence, another thing that kind of gets glossed over. How do we know what attackers are actually out there, what they're doing, what tools, techniques, procedures, and how do we make that into something that's actually defendable? Development. A lot of people don't like coding, and it's completely and honestly like good on you. But so much security is through automation these days. When we're talking about large industries, one of the biggest things that they need is software engineers that know security and are able to use security to better envelop their entire company. Because as much as you could have a SOC analyst that is able to get one detection right every single time, it's so much better if that's just automated. And they can move on to what the next hardest thing is to figure out so they can keep doing that. So next is administration. So when we talk about like, I don't know, you start with routing and switching, and you're learning like, oh, switches and routers, and how do I set up this service or that service. That's like what this is. You're maintaining your infrastructure. And lastly is kind of business needs. So whether you're a manager, you're a CISO, you're a CSO, stuff around that age, and actually developing your security strategy. I interpreted alignment. So we looked at it before. Like you always see like the lawful good or true neutral or chaotic evil. I've kind of interpreted that as pay and intensity. So when you're talking about that, there's going to be jobs across the board where you're going to have low to high pay as well as low to high intensity. So going through this, you can look at like local small companies, anywhere local. If you're being somewhere security related at a local company, you're not going to have much to do, but you're also not going to get paid too well. Moving forth, you have something like freelance where you get to choose what you do, but it's higher pay. And then lastly, old tech. This is something that I reference, and I don't know if it's an actual thing. When you're talking about companies like Cisco or like established companies where they know exactly what kind of people they need, there's never going to be going out of bounds. It's absolutely 40 hours a week, and if you like leave for 2 weeks, they won't even notice. That's old tech. They still pay really well. Moving up in intensity, we start to look at like government. So government, unfortunately, very low pay. It's getting a little bit better with some changes to laws. And we start to move further. I put a government and like startup on like similar phases because startup, some people will go just intense, but some people will just like never do anything at all. And then big tech. So we're talking like Apple, Google type places. Take into account that like as you move from low intensity to high intensity, it's always going to be the same way across. So I'd also say that like government's not as intense as big tech. So stuff like that. And lastly, the highest intensity. We're talking education. So you're looking at researchers, professors that are not only teaching students, but they're also conducting research that is far more advanced than most people actually do in industry. Likewise, government contractors. When you're on an actual contract and need to put in the time and work for that, that's heavy research. That's heavy. It's a lot of stress. And lastly, I put fintech as like the highest intensity, highest pay. You're looking at hours that are like sometimes upwards of 80, but you're getting paid insane amounts. So that's my alignment chart. I feel like it encompasses pretty much any job role that you can start to look at. You can start to understand what the trade-offs are. So let's start with those classes. So defense. First thing you're going to be looking at is a SOC analyst. I'd also like to say for everything that I'm going to be going over, these salaries, I couldn't find one great source. So I found one source that had them all. So they will be, I'd argue most of them higher or lower depending on my own personal beliefs, but this is what it's saying. So you're looking at a salary around 90K full time. Low is 65, and then I'm pretty sure these are like quartiles, so you're 25th and 75th quartile. So like 65,000 to 135,000. Again, an enormous expanse because again, this is going to be looking at like, oh, you're at a small local company or you're at like fintech. This is generally known in the security industry as the entry-level job. It's you're sitting on a computer and you're diagnosing threats. A lot of people love it. A lot of people hate it. It's for you to figure out. You're detecting and responding to those attacks, and a lot of this is SIEM/Q based. So you get in these alerts that say, "Hey, I think something might be awry here," and it's up to you to figure out whether or not it's like that, and then you triage or like get whoever's involved with it. I would like to say that this also a lot of places that do SOC work have extremely irregular hours because they offer 27-hour coverage. So you might be having a work week that's Tuesday to Saturday, or you might be on, they call them shifts. So shifts are just 8 hours and there's 3 shifts a day. So you choose or you get chosen a block. As you get more senior, you'll have like a normal like 9 to 5, but you might be in like the 1 a.m. to 9 a.m. block. And again, those change. Moving your way up, I call this like middle of the range. I feel like people normally graduate from like SOC analyst to incident response. You're looking at incident response, which when you know that there's an actual attack happening and they need to call in the big guns, you are the big guns. This is advanced pure defensive. After a breach, you get called in. You restore business operations as well as understanding what underlying issue caused it. And then you work with the company in order to figure out an incident and take care of it. Very polar week. I've talked to incident responders that have said, oh yeah, I had a 30-hour work week, or I had a 120-hour work week. And like, it's like either you're working 16 hours a day or you're working 4. And so it's going to depend on what's out there, how many people are attacking, how many people are going to your company. Yeah. So I'm not going to focus on every single possible little thing that you can do within here. I think those are the 2 main blobs that you can focus pure defensive into work. Pure defensive work. So talking offense, we got pen testers, average salary 115. Classic offensive security assessment. You're week by week talking to companies or breaking into companies. They give you some sort of scope. They said, find everything. And you do normally like a week of actual testing and a week of report writing. And you give them the report, they won't fix it, and then you go on. Yeah. So a lot of people really like this because it feels like you are the hacker. You're the attacker, and a lot of people find like solace or enjoyment in that. A lot of people also find that kind of monotonous because you're doing something new every week because you're working on a new company, but 99% of the time, everyone's going to still have the same responder issue that's been around since 2007, so you can always get AD with a single tool, or a domain admin with a single tool. So it ebbs and flows. So report writing, you also need to remember report writing is half the job. Legitimately, when you're talking about billable hours, it is half the job, if not more sometimes. There's also tons of specialization here. As you move up, or as you start, you'll kind of like get thrown on different tests, and you'll be like, oh, do you like web, or do you like network internal or external? Do you like social engineering engagements? Do you want to work with containers or Kubernetes? And then as you work your way up, 90% of what you're going to be doing is going to be in a single or of like one of 2 roles. As you get completely just like engrossed in it and you become an expert. Next, red teamers. As we talked about, like SOC analysts turning into incident response, I feel like pen test turns into red team. So you're looking at salaries, definitely going above. I think that's like a 10K pay raise, but honestly, I feel like it's normally more. Yeah, this is long-term offensive security assessments, and at that in depth. So instead of using off-the-shelf tools, you might be saying, oh, this entire week, what I'm going to be working on is I found this bespoke service. I'm going to go through the source code. I'm going to create a custom exploit, and I'm going to report back to my team for someone else to execute it, maybe. So you're working in a team. You're doing something extremely specific. It's completely, sometimes they'll limit scope to be like a single domain. So you're like, maybe only do network or social engineering based. But for big red teams, you're going to say, I'm going to go at this company with anything I have, and I get to do anything. So a lot of it will include social engineering work, which will get you a lot of access. So this is less consulting. You're going to be meeting with less clients, and you're going to be working more internal to your own team. Lastly is vulnerability researcher. I feel like this is like the prime. So this is like highest pay or moving towards highest pay. You're uncovering security flaws not in a specific user system or specific company systems, but what you're doing is instead finding flaws in software out there. So instead of figuring out what one company has that has an issue, you're thinking about what software do companies use across the board and what's the issue that I can get to say I improve security across everything. So I would generally break this up into like there's 2 types of VR. There's like ethical and unethical. I could not find better words for it, so I'm just gonna say that. So like Google Project Zero, who like reports everything, or Bug Bounty, where you report and get paid, or there's unethical, where you're like talking about like government contractors that are like, I need, I don't know, a SCADA 0 day so I can blow up these centrifuges. Yeah, or like just straight up like dark market, where you're going to be saying, "Oh, I need a iOS 0 day that's like a 0 click, so I can get these journalists, uh, very pesky journalists." So VR. Next, moving out of offensive, let's talk about threat intelligence. Like I said before, this is how do we track, how do we understand threats in the wild. We're not so much looking at how do we break in, but how do we categorize what's out there and what attackers are doing. So one of the big things here is reverse engineering, kind of similar to vulnerability researchers in some senses. Just because you're like taking apart and understanding malware, and for VR, a lot of that is sometimes the same. But main focus here is classification, understanding, and then finally defense for the most part. So you're deconstructing unknown code, identifying interesting parts, aka like what is it, with a Heartbleed, they found a domain that when registered was just a kill switch for the entire thing. So stuff like that. So purposes mainly just like sample classification, like, oh, this is a rootkit, this is by this group. Protocol and algorithm analysis, so you can then filter it into, say, detections, so you can say, or so that you can have detections on your computer, so Microsoft Defender can like yell at you for when you compile like Go code or something. And finally, like vulnerability identification. So going back to those like pesky journalists, and you have your iOS 0 day, and you get a hold of that iOS 0 day. Well, what's the actual issue that it's exploiting, and how do we tell the vendor what the issue is that they need a patch? Next, security researcher. This is like a more holistic. You're looking at trends in the industry. You're looking at what is happening in terms of what malware groups are out there, what nation-state threats might be active in certain regions. So you're looking at a lot of tools, techniques, procedures, malware samples. You can say, hey, I've been seeing a lot of Telegram 0 days or clicks or whatever it is. And you can go through and say, we should start to look at this. We should notify, we should write a report generally on how this has been done. We publish that report, and then it's off to the rest to do more specific stuff. So these are the people that are pulling out those generic trends and say, this is on the rise. Maybe we should get this in the hands of some reverse engineers so we can figure out exactly what's happening. This is detecting and reporting trends. Next, some people would argue it's the least important. Some people would argue it's the most important. A lot will generally argue that you get the least action here. Compliance. So when you're talking about it, you have auditors. Auditors are basically the people that go into your system and say, hey, you're not encrypting your data properly. This is an issue. And then they won't check anything beyond that. Sometimes. There's very good auditors out there. But you're generally verifying adherence to laws, regulations, standards, and compliance. When you say, I'm GDPR compliant and SOC 2 compliant, how do you know that? Well, you have an external auditor come in and say, hey, how does the system exactly work? I want to understand it. I want to understand what defenses, countermeasures, threats are involved in this system so that we can make a holistic analysis of what needs to be done, if anything. Next, compliance officer. This is the other edge of auditors. They are the people making sure to put all those countermeasures in place and fix those issues. They are the people a lot of the times on the teams that say, I'm in charge of these systems. I need to make sure that the development teams know to do this and that, and make sure that they acknowledge the new compliance regulations. They are kind of in a managerial role. I wouldn't say that, or in like the softest managerial role, I guess I could say, but they're out there to kind of push everything further in terms of a compliance sense. So again, helping with countermeasures, integrating logging and reporting, so that you can check off those boxes in your compliance report. Yeah, and dealing with like internal audits. Development. I know compliance was real short. Development. Arguably my favorite, arguably most people's least favorite. We're talking about software engineers. You said, I just did my entire cybersecurity degree and I'm going to be a software engineer. Wow, you're like wasting your life. We didn't learn any coding. Well, the thing that a lot of people out, a lot of companies are looking for is software engineers that understand security. If you can say a break into a system, but you also know how to code a system that doesn't know how to get broken into, that just saves them later. So instead of like waiting for security to just catch up later, like most people's, as Alex was talking about, software development lifecycle, we just assume that our code would get fixed later if there is an issue. Well, how do we by default just start working with secure code and building secure code? This is by getting security people into software engineering. So we're building software, we're addressing bugs and vulnerabilities as they occur, automating systems to make them secure, and then also figuring out automation can go very far with security, and is like honestly a backbone at this point. Ensuring the security of systems in terms of automation, like code scanning, CI/CD, all enormous things to be aware of. DevSecOps. I'd be hard pressed to say that like one goes into the other. I feel like they're different roles, but same across companies. So DevSecOps is just another way of saying software engineer, but you have more responsibilities. So generally, DevSecOps stands for development, security, and operations. The goal for DevSecOps and these roles is that instead of having three separate people, the developer, the security, and then the operations person, let's make them one. If we can bring them through in the life cycle of an application and make sure that they're doing everything on the step, or doing everything across the step, across like the life cycle, we can ensure that nothing is forgotten or just like misplaced, configured incorrectly, and it should speed up by just having one person do something over a longer period of time. So you're building software and systems, very similar to what we were talking about before, building security, deploy and maintain work. As you like see, you'll see a lot of software engineering positions, which is just DevSecOps, but just different label on it. But biggest thing is you're more closely integrated into security. You're saying that your role actually involves security, so you are held to a higher standard. Yep. Next, administration. So when I talk about administration, people are like, oh, managers and stuff. Well, we actually need to talk about how do we make sure that our systems are consistently updated so that when someone says, oh, there's a 0 day in Office 365 for the 7th time this week, we can figure out and get that patch out. So vulnerability management. Generally high salary, 130. I should be probably just noting them, but you can look for them yourselves. You're watching security trends, watching those reports from security researchers saying, oh, this threat actor is out, or people are using this CVE, it's been seen in the wild, people actually using it, or this malware has been out. So they're the people that generally are responsible for saying, hey, does this affect our business needs? Or does it affect our business? Do we run this specific version of this specific open source application? Okay, cool. How do we remediate it now? So a lot of it's determining applicability and alleviating those security concerns we just talked about, and as well as proactively stopping new threats by being, trying to have really verbose logging, figuring out when stuff's happening at that instant, and overall just do better. Security engineer. This I probably should have put before because it's like the most inclusive role out there. When you see something that says security engineer, you could literally be doing everything from software engineering to vulnerability management, to security research, to anything. It is a grab bag solution that people say, we need security. They're like, get a security engineer. So they're designing secure systems, researching solution. A lot of times security engineers are not software engineers, but they get forced to build software. So instead, their favorite thing is external solutions. Open source is always best because you don't have to find someone to pay for it. And that is forever the biggest issue, is getting someone to pay for it and then going through the process of procurement. If any of you guys haven't dealt with procurement in an enterprise environment, you have not had hell yet. And then there's the enterprise solution, which you'll be fighting for a year to get it working or get it through. And then generally, you're you're generally always thinking, where might an issue be? How do we check if there's an issue? How do we alleviate that issue if not? And how do we make sure that going on, we'll get alerted if there is.
What is procurement?
Procurement. Procurement is the fun word for buying something. There'll be entire departments in enterprise that are procurement. So you said, I want, I don't know, license for Shodan. They're like, cool, we're going to do a 1 month talk with Shodan to see what their lowest price is and then end up like not buying it. And they'll go through that process. They'll say, hey, this is how much money we can have. What can we get? And then get you the wrong solution. Yeah, and sometimes I've heard horror stories of procurement where they will legitimately shut down stuff because there is an open source solution which just does not work, but they don't understand enough to know that it does not work for your application, and they'll just deny your request. So it is your a lot of time it is your biggest battle is dealing with procurement. Yeah, when does procurement actually take a year? Only take a year, yeah. Procurement can be like I said, hell. I've worked at companies where our procurement team has legitimately made people cry, and they were proud of that. And so just know that whether you have a really good procurement team that makes people cry or not, they will try to get softer most of the time. Otherwise, yeah, you can run into a lot of issues where it is not a year, but like 5 years, and then your request that you made 5 years ago set for like Microsoft Vista something finally gets you finally get those keys, and you're like, oh, now we're on Windows 11. But yeah. Next, site reliability engineers. These are the people who are always on call. SREs. They will. Can you imagine? They determine system reliability and keep it so that it's available. Ensure availability. Kind of in the title. But they do a lot of incident management. Something goes down. Something's not highly available. Something could be broken easily. They're in charge of it. They're making sure that people aren't messing up their configs. They hold that Terraform repo very closely to their lives. And if anyone makes a bad commit, an extra space or period at the end, or sorry, space or extra new line at the end of your config, they'll yell at you. But yeah. So they deal a lot with automation and efficiency. They try to ultimately develop and maintain orchestrate systems, make sure that it's stupid proof, even though you're in a company full of stupid people, and will never work, but they do their best. And they make sure that everything's up most of the time. And then lastly, business, the big bads. How do you get into a technical role that's not technical? Business. So engineering manager. A lot of the times when you're talking about management, or hopefully a lot of times, as long as you're at a good company, the managers are previous technical people. And that is like the best place to ever live because they understand what you're in and they'll actually help out and are probably way smarter than you. So if you can get a good manager, love them. So they do a lot of project management. They'll be your little scrum master. They'll be handling all your little Jira tasks, and they'll make sure that you're on task. So they maintain those teams, timelines, resources. They plan out projects, oversee objectives. They say, okay, this OKR is X, Y, or Z. We want to make sure that we see this feature by then. A lot of times this can be very closely related to project management, but they are a little bit higher on the chain in terms of leadership. What we're talking about next, they're your abstraction administrative. So when there's an issue where you accidentally take prod down for a couple hours, it's going to be your manager getting yelled at, probably not you. They guide and manage the teams, make sure that no one's just, I don't know, Zoom sleeping, or I don't know what the term is for going home and not doing anything while on Zoom. But yeah, they're the internal face. If there's a problem on their team, they get told about it and then they handle it. The big bads, the CSOs, Chief Security Officer. Probably it's going to be less technical than what we're going to be talking about in terms of the CISO, Chief Information Security Officer, but they generally, older term, they're organizational security. So physical security, making sure the locks are there, making sure that I know there's cameras and that no one can break in easily. But their roles have recently been expanded to also include the digital era. So now the person who like normally just talked with the bodyguards is now handling your digital security. Um, yeah, a lot of times they're not as they're pretty much not technical. They do a lot of physical security, emergency management, risk management strategies. They do a ton. Um, and then lastly, CISO, the alternative. Pretty much the same exact thing, but they have information in their title. So security and information protection, they are specifically focused on digital security. So some of the times most of the times you only have one or the other. Some good companies will have both. So one person's in charge of physical security, one's in charge of online security, information security, whatever it is. And they develop security strategies, manage cyber risks, ensure compliance. Sounds like the same exact thing, or similar at least. And yeah, they're just confirmed with anything digital or information assets. And both of these generally will try to scope your entire company in terms of their security and will lead it towards down a more secure path. And that's about it. I didn't go over absolutely everything. I just wanted to provide a good overview. And lastly, I'd like to take questions.
What are you?
What am I? That's a hard question. So I've done roles as I've worked enterprise IT. I've done SOC. I've done SOC work. I've done security engineering. I've done pen testing. I'm doing software engineering technically as my main role, but it's on a security research team. And yeah, so I'm moving into the intersection between security research and software engineering. So automating security research. Very exciting. I'm actually really excited. Yay. No, I'm gonna call him Max because I don't like you too. What's up?
Yeah. How much do you think that whatever? I know you said you did like a lot of different things. How much does your experience from one of those things kind of translate to something that's not as related to that?
Absolutely. It's the age-old question of someone offered me a SOC analyst position, but I don't want to be a blue teamer for the rest of my life. Almost everything in security is transferable. If you know how to defend a system, you can better attack it. If you know how to attack a system, you can better understand how security threats are or how to model security threats, understand them, how they might attack, understand your system. Everything is applicable, and as long as you can market it like that. My favorite thing to ever say in interview is that I know that I kept saying this for different roles, and I guess it's lost its weight in my mind, but for people hearing it the first time, it's great. I've worked a bunch of places, I've done a bunch of jobs, and this is what I'm most interested at. I have the context around everything, and I know that this is where I want to be. So being able to say that you have context outside, see different perspectives, understand different, just anything. You're talking a context game, and just saying that you understand and know this is something that you're passionate about because you've tried a lot can go quite a far way. Anthony.
At what point did you like say this is what I want to do? How did you from that?
When I saw the offer. No, that's a joke. But of course, for everyone, money is important. You got to get paid well, so you might move your decision based on that. I personally knew this is where I wanted to be. I'm going to be Datadog full time come February, and it was the internship that really solidified it. There's a bunch of other external reasons that I really wanted to be there, but the internship, my team is directly in charge of. It's hard to describe what we do, but ultimately everything we do is just in the direction of furthering Datadog security, learning how to make better detections for our customers, making sure that we have good automation in place in order to check stuff. We get to just make honeypot networks where we're able to then abstract that and give it to customers for information. There's a ton of really cool security projects that honestly remind me a lot of RITSEC in terms of I get to do this, but instead of just dropping it after a month because it works barely, I'm going to build it out to be an enterprise solution, something that people can actually use. And that was the point where I felt that, hey, I'm passionate about this. I feel like I can learn for at least the next couple of years. I feel like I can continue to grow. And if I end up not being interested, there's plenty of ways to pivot from this. So I think that's the biggest thing, is always understanding maybe an exit strategy, but also realizing that you can learn and you will learn. You don't want to go to the job that you're overqualified for, because what you're going to be is not learning and you're going to get bored.
Have you done like above, below, or at the average salary that you have in the presentation?
I would say above, for majority of it. I think my freshman year, I was at nearly $30 an hour, and since then it's only gone up. You can make a lot of money just playing off previous experience and just saying, hey, I got this here. I was legitimately in an internship where from my first block to my second block, I got a 50% raise just because I asked for it. Because they're like, oh, you work well. I'm like, cool, well, you're going to pay me for that? And my manager in a 5-minute call said, sure, why not?
Around 45, around that.
Okay. Zach, you have a question or no? How do you use this offensively? You got to red team the recruiters. You got to know more than they do. Know their home address, know their kids. Being able to communicate well, know positions, be able to understand what roles should generally be, as well as look up more context on a company, as well as where they fit in the industry, is the biggest thing that you can ever do for yourself. You might know absolutely nothing, but you'll learn on the job. But just because you have a good attitude, got a good personality, and know what you want to do, you can get a job like that. Meanwhile, there's people that have been doing it for 5-10 years that just have a bad personality and no one likes them, and they won't get the job. Which, it's sad to say that experienced people don't get the job, but things don't come to people that are annoying. Okay, I feel like I've probably taken up enough time.